Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. My guest today is the Deputy Prime Minister of Singapore, Teo Chee Hean. Thank you very much for being here.
Happy to be here, Mark.
Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, I want to begin with the so-called trade war between the US and China. We've seen tension. There's been an announcement at the G20 that there would be a pause in this trade war and that within 3 months there could be an agreement. Do you have hopes that there will indeed be an agreement to calm this tension?
Well, we welcome this pause. Well, it breaks the cycle of negativity that's been going on for far too long. And we hope that during this pause, both sides will take steps to resolve at least some of the more prominent issues, build some trust, and then we hope that that will allow further progress. This trade war, I think, doesn't benefit anyone.
Right. Your Prime Minister pointed out a few weeks ago that what's happening between the US and China can create really very deep tensions and maybe worse. Is there really a worry in Singapore that if this pause ends up not leading to an agreement, there could be more tensions and maybe fractions?
Well, it affects us in 3 ways, and I think it affects many countries in similar ways. First of all, our exports may be affected by higher tariffs, and that's not good for us, solar panels, electronics products. Second, the disruptions that it causes to the global supply chain. I mean, we are very plugged into the global supply chain, and that affects us as well, and many other countries. And third, as you point out, where there is this tension between the two biggest countries in the world right now, that causes problems. On the trade front, if it depresses trade overall, investments overall, that's not good for any of us. And if it spills over into other areas of competition, well, then that broadens the issue considerably, and I think that will not be to anyone's advantage.
Right, because again, to cite your Prime Minister, he said this might force countries in the region, including Singapore, to take sides. And when you have good relations with both, like you do, it's a very difficult decision.
Yes. I don't think anybody wants to do that.
China might be forced to do so.
China is a major trading partner of ASEAN and our neighbours. It accounts for something like 17% of our trade. But I think the preference for all countries in the world is to be able to have a constructive relationship, maintain that multilateral trading system and an open trade. That's much better for everyone, including the US and China.
But isn't Donald Trump a threat to this multilateral model that's been in place for so many years?
Well, I would say that there are legitimate issues to be addressed, but these are not issues which only have to do with trade. They also have to do with how we manage our own economies, whether it's managing the internal balances between savings, investments, and consumption, whether we are able to spread the benefits of trade widely, whether our people as a whole see technology as a threat or as an opportunity, how we educate them and give them skills.
I understand what you're saying, but when the president of the most powerful country in the world threatens and even sometimes slaps tariffs, this is not about your economy, it's about his attitude.
Well, I can't speak for him, but we are concerned about the escalation in the tariffs between China and the US, and also between the US and other countries, because it does affect trade. It does bring into question the multilateral trading system. And we hope that these issues can be addressed more constructively.
Right. You mentioned that it touches trade, obviously, but also other issues. We've seen tensions in the South China Sea between China and many of its neighbors, but also between China and the US. And some are fearing that this could eventually lead to a military clash. How concerned are you about that?
Well, among the claimant states, this year has been relatively calm. So among the claimant states, relatively calm. And ASEAN and China have agreed to a single negotiating text for a code of conduct for the South China Sea. Right. So we hope to put that forward next year. And the Chinese Prime Minister has indicated that we should progress and try and settle the code of conduct within 3 years.
Is that possible? Is that realistic? Because it sounds very ambitious.
Well, I think that if there's goodwill, we want to do that. I don't think anybody really wants to see a clash in the South China Sea. Singapore is not a claimant state, but we do want to see that issues get resolved peacefully and in accordance with international law. There's also the other issue of freedom of navigation under international law, including UNCLOS.
It is under threat.
Which we have a great interest in as well. And I believe that all countries will have an interest in that as well, including China, because China is a major trading nation now. And what she does in the South China Sea with regard to freedom of navigation will be reflected elsewhere in the world, where China has interests in freedom of navigation.
So you're telling China it should take notice, essentially.
Well, I think it's in its own interest to have freedom of navigation on the seas in the world.
Right. Singapore was in the headlines back in June when it hosted an unprecedented summit between Donald Trump and the leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un. Clearly, you were the host. Now, there's talk of a potential second summit at the beginning of next year. Is Singapore willing to be the host again?
Well, we have not been asked. We have heard that there are other possible sites being considered, and we're happy if the two sides can find a suitable location.
But you would be happy to play go-between again. I mean, this was an important step.
We did not play go-between. We served the coffee and the tea. We were happy to be a location for the summit and to bring the temperature down. Because earlier this year, there was a risk
of war.
That would be a miscalculation on both sides because the forces were moving. There was an escalatory cycle, and we're glad that the summit in Singapore helped to bring that down.
Do you think now this war possibility is less important because of that summit?
Oh, I think the temperature certainly has come down, and we are glad to see that because I think both sides were moving in an escalatory cycle, which there could have been an accident, which neither side would have wanted.
Okay. You're in France, obviously. There is a strategic partnership between Singapore and France since 2012. What's in it for Singapore? What's the interest for you?
Well, both of us are quite like-minded countries in terms of trade. There are 2,000 French companies in Singapore now promoting all kinds of French products, from aeroplanes to perfumes and very fine French wines and liquor. But we also look to the future. We see innovation as a critical element for the growth of our two countries. So we have this year of innovation this year with 60 over events. We have a global innovation alliance office here in Paris, our first in Europe, and France also has a France Technology Hub in Singapore. So there are many areas in which we can work together.
Right. Are you hoping that the French president will soon visit Singapore?
Well, we have invited him. We hope that he'll be able to come next year or the year after. My Prime Minister was honored to be here for Bastille Day this year.
Right. I want to quickly touch upon the Singapore model. Your party, the People's Action Party, has been in power since independence back in 1965. There's supposed to be a changing of the guard, the Prime Minister stepping aside, and elections. They're supposed to take place at the latest in 2021. There is talk that it could take place earlier. Is this a possibility?
Well, the Singapore model is one that's based on consensus and trying to bring people together. Right. I think all too much in the world today, people talk about division when they talk about politics, contention, conflict, argument. But what we try and do in Singapore is to bring people together, right, so that we can achieve stability and also achieve our national goals. I think that is the objective in Singapore politics. We've had two successful and very smooth transitions in the last, since independence. Prime Minister Goh was Prime Minister for 14 years. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong already 14 years. And he wants to see this, and I also want to see this smooth transition take place.
Right, but you won't answer about the date?
No.
Okay. Last thing, you're here in France. There is this Yellow Vest movement. It's about a lot of things, but it also touches upon an issue that's probably a global issue, rising inequalities. We've seen Trump in the United States, populist parties in the rise in Europe. Is this also a concern in your country?
Yes, it is. I think it's a concern in all countries. But I think countries need to do three things. One, we have to make sure that the benefits of globalization are widely spread.
That's not the case right now.
So we have to work on it. And I think it can be done. And we should see technology not as a challenge and something that takes away jobs. Skills training, lifelong learning is one of the major things that we're embarking on in Singapore right now to make sure that our people stay employable throughout their lives. And that's also another way of making sure that the benefits of global trade and technology are widely spread.
So you're not expecting a yellow vest movement in Singapore anytime soon, I imagine?
Well, we talk to our people and our unions and our workers all the time, and we try and form a tripartite relationship. We now have a future economy committee, and that Mr. Heng Swee Keat is chairing that. And we are looking sector by sector to see how we can help companies transform, how we can help workers gain new skills and remain employable in each of these sectors and each of the types of jobs that we have in Singapore. That's critical. You have to do the actual groundwork.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister. And thank you very much for watching this interview here on France 24.